My parents said, sell your tech dream and get a real job. Then the $200 million buyout offer arrived, and they begged for a share. The digital glow of the tablet cast a cool, sterile light across Alara's refined features, a stark contrast to the warmth that had once filled her heart for her only son. A slow, deliberate scroll through the social media feed brought into sharp focus the image that finally fractured her enduring patience. There they were, Orion, her 52-year-old son, his arms slung around Bryony, his wife, both beaming, an azure Maldivian seascape stretching behind them. The accompanying caption, bold and dripping with self-congratulation, read, "Paradise found. Soaking up the sun in the Maldives with our wonderful children and their dedicated nannies. A much-deserved family escape." Alara's gaze lingered on the picture, then drifted to the comments section, a cascade of heart emojis and envious remarks. She noted the exquisite resort, the private villa with its infinity pool, the designer swimwear Bryony sported. Every detail screamed opulence, an opulence she knew, with a certainty that chilled her to the bone, was entirely underwritten by her. What truly struck her, however, was not the extravagance itself, but the pointed, almost gleeful omission of her presence. Just a week prior, she had tentatively mentioned her desire for a modest family gathering, perhaps a quiet dinner, longing for the simple warmth of shared laughter and conversation. Orion had dismissed it with a curt, "Too busy, mother. Real estate is booming." Bryony had chimed in, her voice dripping with thinly veiled condescension, "And honestly, Alara, the children find your stories a bit quaint. They prefer modern amusements." Alara remembered the sting of that word, quaint, as if her life, her experiences, her very essence, were something dusty and irrelevant, fit only for a forgotten corner of an antique shop. She had once delighted in recounting tales of her own childhood adventures, of Arthur's early struggles and triumphs, stories she believed offered valuable lessons in resilience and ingenuity. But the children, prodded by Bryony, would often yawn or scroll on their phones, their eyes glazed over with boredom, waiting for the real entertainment their parents promised. The exclusion was not new, it was a dull ache she had carried for years, a constant background hum of disappointment. But the public display of it, the boasting about dedicated nannies, while simultaneously deeming her too old for travel, it was a slap, cold and undeniable, delivered with the casual cruelty of those who felt no need to justify their actions. A tremor ran through Alara's delicate hands, but it was not a tremor of weakness. It was the vibration of a dam, long holding back a torrent of unspoken pain and sacrifice, finally beginning to crack. For years, she had built a mental fortress around her hurt, brick by brick, telling herself that their disinterest was merely a symptom of their busy lives, that their occasional bursts of affection were genuine, that her financial support was merely a loving gesture, appreciated in ways they couldn't articulate. But the Maldives photo shattered that fortress, exposing the raw truth. Her lips, usually curved in a gentle, almost wistful smile, flattened into a thin, resolute line. Her eyes, usually soft with a mother's longing, hardened into chips of glacial ice. She did not raise her voice. She did not shed a tear. Instead, with a quiet, almost imperceptible sigh that seemed to carry the weight of decades of unacknowledged giving, Alara set the tablet gently on the polished mahogany table beside her. A stillness settled over her, profound and absolute, a quiet storm brewing beneath her serene exterior. This, she knew with the calm certainty of an oracle, a foresight sharpened by deep-seated pain, was the final, unforgivable transgression. The silent financial backbone of their extravagant lives was about to snap, not with a roar of anger, but with a whisper, chillingly precise, a whisper that promised a devastating silence. For decades, Alara had lived a life of quiet luxury, inherited from her late husband, Arthur, a visionary tech pioneer whose early investments had blossomed into an empire. Arthur had adored Alara, showering her with love and providing for a future of comfort and security. He was a man of immense foresight, not just in business, but in life, understanding the fragility of human relationships and the corrupting nature of unearned wealth. He had often spoken to Alara about the responsibility that came with their fortune, about using it to uplift, not to enable. Upon his passing 20 years prior, he had left her an estate of staggering value, a legacy not just of wealth, but of his unwavering belief in her wisdom and generosity. Elara, however, never viewed it as mere money, a hoard to be protected. She saw it as a tool, a means to cultivate happiness, especially for her beloved son, Orion. Her only desire was genuine love, respect, and inclusion in their lives, not merely to be consulted when financial needs arose. She yearned for the warmth of family dinners, the spontaneous hug, the feeling of being truly wanted, not just needed. Orion, her only child, had inherited little of his father's drive or intellect. He was a mediocre real estate agent, perpetually boasting of big deals that somehow never quite materialized into self-sufficiency. His professional life was a carefully constructed facade, masking an utter reliance on his mother's hidden generosity. Elara had, for years, silently covered the substantial shortfall between his exaggerated income and their truly exorbitant lifestyle. She remembered the day he proudly announced he'd negotiated a steal on their sprawling, 5-bedroom house in the most exclusive suburb, a property she knew was well beyond his means. She had quietly provided the hefty down payment, a sum so large it would have purchased several smaller homes outright. Year after year, she had also discreetly covered the escalating property taxes, the exorbitant utility bills for their sprawling estate that seemed to consume endless power, and even the costly garden maintenance that kept their manicured lawns pristine, a verdant illusion of self-sufficiency. She had discovered their need for these payments through a combination of subtle hints from Orion, casual complaints from Bryony about rising costs, and her own meticulous financial monitoring, a habit ingrained by Arthur. Each time, a quiet dread would settle in her stomach, but she would push it aside, telling herself it was for Orion's happiness, for the family's stability. Bryony, Orion's wife, was a social climber par excellence, her life meticulously curated around appearances and the pursuit of elite social standing. Her days revolved around designer boutiques, where she was greeted by name by fawning staff, exclusive luncheons at the city's most prestigious clubs, and philanthropic committees where her presence was more about prestige and networking than genuine contribution. She viewed Elara not as a mother-in-law, but as a limitless ATM, a convenient, inexhaustible source of funds to uphold their extravagant facade. Elara recalled countless instances. The brand-new Mercedes S-Class Bryony simply had to have every 3 years, claiming it was essential for client impressions, the lease payments for which Elara secretly wired from a discreet account, the Patek Philippe watch Orion received for his 40th birthday, a gift Elara had purchased when Bryony hinted at its necessity for Orion's business image, a symbol of success that Bryony believed he needed to project, the annual family ski trips to Aspen or St. Moritz, always booked and paid for by Elara, though her invitation was perpetually lost in the mail or too last minute, or, most often, simply not extended at all. She would see their gleeful social media posts from snow-capped mountains, a pang of loneliness her only companion. Their children, Elara's grandchildren, were equally accustomed to a life of unearned privilege. Their education, from exclusive private nurseries where tuition rivaled a college education, to prestigious boarding schools known for their global alumni networks, was entirely financed by Elara. Tuition fees, astronomical extracurricular activities, specialized sports coaches, elite music lessons, exclusive summer camps abroad, and even lavish allowances that dwarfed the average person's monthly salary were all quietly handled by their grandmother. The grandchildren, in turn, learned their parents' habits of entitlement, rarely acknowledging Elara's generosity, seeing her as a benign, if somewhat irrelevant, source of infinite supply. Their youthful faces would light up at the sight of a new designer item or a fat allowance, but their eyes would quickly glaze over if Elara attempted a genuine conversation, or worse, offered advice. The disrespect was a slow, insidious poison, seeping into the very fabric of their interactions. Family gatherings, when they rarely occurred, were often at a distance, filled with thinly veiled remarks about Elara's old-fashioned ways, her quaint perspectives on life, or her lack of understanding of modern business. Her advice, born of years of experience managing Arthur's vast estate and investments, was openly dismissed. "Mother, you just don't understand the market dynamics," Orion would condescendingly state when she suggested a more prudent investment strategy, his tone implying her intellect was as outdated as a rotary phone. Bryony would interject with a dismissive wave of her perfectly manicured hand, "Darling, Elara means well, but her world is so different from ours. We're building an empire, not collecting stamps." Elara would feel a familiar knot tighten in her chest, the weight of their ingratitude pressing down on her. She remembered the quiet ache in her chest after one particularly brutal Christmas where she had given each grandchild a substantial sum, enough for a trip or a significant investment, only for them to complain openly about not receiving the latest iPhone or designer handbag that their friends had. Orion had laughed it off, "Kids these days, mother. They expect the best." Bryony had simply shrugged, her eyes glinting with a touch of challenge, "You spoil them, Elara. But then, it is your money, isn't it?" That phrase, "it is your money," echoed in Elara's mind, always carrying the unspoken addendum, "and therefore, it is ours, to do with as we please, regardless of your feelings or wishes." Each time she heard it, a tiny, almost imperceptible crack would form in the reservoir of her patience. For years, Elara had clung to a fragile hope. She believed that her unwavering financial support would eventually buy her the one thing she truly craved, their genuine affection, their respect, a place at their family table that wasn't merely a seat for the financier. She convinced herself that this was her way of showing love, of ensuring their happiness, that eventually, they would see her efforts and return her affection. Each time she saw a flicker of warmth, a genuine smile, she would open her purse strings a little wider, hoping this time, it would be enough. But the warmth was fleeting, the smiles superficial, and the demands unending, each new request chipping away at her dwindling reserves of hope. The well of her patience, deep and ancient, was finally reaching its lowest ebb. The Maldives vacation, with its public declaration of her irrelevance, had not just emptied the well, it had fractured its very foundation, leaving nothing but barren stone. The morning after witnessing the Maldivian extravagance, Elara awoke with a clarity she hadn't felt in decades. The old ache of disappointment was gone, replaced by a steely resolve that felt surprisingly liberating. There was no internal debate, no lingering doubt, no second-guessing herself. The decision was made, firm and unyielding. She dressed meticulously, as always, in a silk blouse and tailored trousers, choosing a deep forest green, a color that seemed to reflect her newfound inner strength. But today, her movements held a new, quiet determination, an almost surgical precision. Her first call was to her longtime estate lawyer, Mr. Geoffrey Hayes, a man who had handled Arthur's affairs and, by extension, Elara's for over 2 decades. His voice was warm and familiar, a comforting presence she had often relied upon. "Geoffrey," Elara began, her voice calm, devoid of emotion, each word carefully chosen, "I need to make some significant changes to my financial arrangements, effective immediately." Mr. Hayes, accustomed to Elara's precise and well-considered decisions, listened patiently as she laid out her instructions. He had always admired her sharp mind and meticulous attention to detail, a trait he knew she shared with her late husband. "Firstly, Geoffrey, I want to revoke any and all existing powers of attorney granted to my son, Orion, or his wife, Bryony. Absolutely all of them. Ensure there are no loopholes, no obscure documents that might still grant them access." A faint pause on the other end, a momentary break in the usual rhythm of their conversations. "Understood, Elara. Is there a particular reason for this sudden change?" His tone was professional, but Elara sensed a hint of deeper concern, perhaps even a knowing recognition. Mr. Hayes, after all, had witnessed the flow of funds to Orion and Bryony over the years and had often subtly hinted at the unsustainability of their lifestyle. "The reason, Geoffrey," Elara replied, her voice remaining even, but the underlying firmness was unmistakable, "is that my generosity has been mistaken for an obligation, and my love for a bottomless well. It is time for them to stand on their own 2 feet. This has been a long time coming." She felt no need to elaborate further. She knew Mr. Hayes, a man of quiet observation, would understand. Next, she systematically outlined the cessation of all direct and indirect financial contributions. All automatic transfers to Orion and Bryony's joint account are to be stopped immediately. This includes the monthly allocation for their household expenses, the quarterly payments for the children's school fees which are due next week, and the annual contribution towards their property taxes which I wired last month. Please arrange for it to be returned if possible. She then moved to the more clandestine payments, the ones she had carefully concealed for years to spare Orion's pride, a pride she now realized was utterly unfounded. The mortgage payments for their primary residence, the ones I have been making from my private account for the last 15 years, those are to cease. The same goes for the lease payments on both their luxury vehicles, the Mercedes and the Range Rover. I also want to cancel any credit cards that I have been secretly paying off for them, effective today. I recall there are at least 2 or 3 such accounts, including one for Bryony's, discretionary spending, often quite substantial. She had kept a meticulous, if painful, record of these expenditures, a quiet testament to her unacknowledged support. Mr. Hayes meticulously noted each instruction, a growing sense of gravity in his silence. He had seen many wealthy families unravel, but rarely with such quiet precision. And the children's trust funds, Elara? The quarterly disbursements that ensure their extravagant allowances? Elara paused, a flicker of something resembling regret crossing her face, a brief pang for the grandchildren who were, in truth, victims of their parents' entitlement. But it was quickly extinguished by a stronger wave of resolve. Those too. All disbursements are to be frozen indefinitely. They are old enough to learn the value of earning their own way, or at least understanding where their previous allowance came from. Perhaps this will be the most valuable lesson I can ever give them, even if it is a harsh one. She knew this would hit the children hard, affecting their sense of social standing among their peers, but the lesson, she reasoned, was long overdue and necessary for their future character. The lawyer confirmed his understanding, promising to execute the changes within the hour, assuring her of the legal impeccability of her actions. Elara, he finally said, his voice tinged with a blend of concern and admiration, I must say, this is quite a decisive move. Are you absolutely certain? The implications will be significant. Absolutely, Geoffrey, Elara replied, a faint, almost imperceptible smile touching her lips, a genuine smile of quiet satisfaction. The only thing I regret is not doing it sooner. The burden has been heavier than you know. Her next call was to her personal banker, Mr. Henderson, a similar conversation unfolding with the same calm authority. He, too, had witnessed the unusual patterns of her accounts, the large sums transferred to her son's various ventures or direct to his household. Within hours, the financial arteries that had pumped life into Orion and Bryony's lavish existence began to constrict, then to close entirely, with the quiet efficiency of a well-oiled machine. The first ripple of panic came subtly, almost imperceptibly, as Orion and Bryony were still basking in the Maldivian sun, oblivious to the storm brewing back home. Bryony, attempting to purchase a particularly ostentatious sapphire necklace from a resort boutique, a glittering bauble she had convinced herself she deserved, was met with the dreaded, transaction declined. Her initial reaction was annoyance, a flash of irritation at such an inconvenience. It must be a system error, she huffed to the sales assistant, pulling out another card, a platinum one Elara had set up for her specifically for emergencies. That too, was declined. This is ridiculous, she exclaimed, her face flushing with embarrassment as other shoppers glanced her way. She tried a third card, black card, which she knew Elara often used for larger purchases for them, a card she considered inviolable. Still declined. Orion. There's something wrong with the cards, she snapped, the first crack appearing in her sun-kissed composure, a hint of genuine worry starting to seep in. Orion, dismissive, sprawled on a nearby lounge chair scrolling through his phone, blamed the resort's faulty POS system, promising to call their bank when they returned to a more civilized part of the world. He remained convinced it was a trivial technical glitch. The real panic began to set in upon their return to their opulent but now financially untethered home. A few days after their return, as the jet lag began to subside and reality crept in, Orion received a stern email from the car dealership: "Urgent. Your lease payment for the Mercedes S-Class is overdue. Immediate action required to avoid repossession." He scrolled down, seeing another notification for Bryony's Range Rover, both due and past due. "What in the world," he muttered, convinced it was a clerical error, a mix-up in the dealership's accounting. He forwarded the emails to Bryony, who was simultaneously staring at an email from their children's exclusive boarding school, the prestigious Northwood Academy: "Outstanding tuition fees for the current term. Please remit payment immediately to avoid suspension of services and removal from the school rolls." The email was formal, unyielding, and carried a threat that struck genuine fear into Bryony's heart. "Orion, what is happening?" Bryony shrieked, her voice rising in a crescendo of panic, tears finally pricking her eyes, not of sadness, but of pure, selfish terror. "My credit cards aren't working anywhere. I tried to buy groceries, they were declined. And the school is demanding payment. Elara always handles this. She manages the accounts." Orion, still in denial, his mind scrambling for an explanation, tried to log into the online banking portal for the joint account Elara usually replenished, the one he relied on for their daily expenditures. His access was denied. He tried again, entering his password with trembling fingers, double-checking the caps lock. Access denied. He called the bank, his heart pounding in his chest. After an infuriatingly long wait on hold, listening to elevator music that grated on his nerves, the representative informed him, her voice polite but firm: "Sir, all standing orders from the account of Mrs. Elara Thorne to your accounts have been cancelled. Furthermore, she has revoked your access and any power of attorney you may have held over her private accounts." Her instructions were explicit and notarized. A cold dread began to seep into Orion's bones, a chilling realization that finally broke through his denial. "Cancelled? What do you mean cancelled? My mother, she would never." His voice trailed off, a horrifying realization dawning on him, the full magnitude of Elara's actions crashing down. Bryony, overhearing, snatched the phone from his hand, her face contorted with rage and fear. "This is outrageous. We need those funds. What about our mortgage? Our children's future?" She screamed into the phone, her carefully constructed composure shattered. The bank representative, professional and unyielding, simply reiterated the changes, advising them to contact Mrs. Thorne directly if they wished to discuss the matter further. The subsequent days were a cascade of escalating financial calamities, each one a fresh blow to their crumbling world. Their domestic staff, a team of housekeepers, gardeners, and a personal chef, demanded overdue wages, their patience having worn thin over weeks of vague promises. When no payment materialized, they collectively resigned, leaving the once immaculate house in a state of growing disarray, piles of laundry accumulating, dust gathering on polished surfaces. Utilities threatened disconnection, ominous red notices arriving in the mail, warning of impending power cuts and water shutoffs. The children's allowances, once plentiful and freely spent, evaporated, leading to unprecedented complaints and tantrums, their privileged lives suddenly devoid of the easy flow of cash they had always known. The truth, stark and brutal, was finally undeniable. Elara had, with quiet precision, severed every financial tie. Their carefully constructed world, built entirely on her hidden generosity, was not merely crumbling, it was collapsing in a spectacular, inevitable implosion, leaving them to face a future they were wholly unprepared for. The realization hit Orion and Bryony like a tidal wave, washing away their complacency and replacing it with raw, unadulterated terror. Their credit cards were useless, their mortgage was in arrears, the car leases were past due, and the children's elite education was on the brink of collapse. Their carefully constructed illusion of success was disintegrating before their very eyes, revealing the hollowness beneath. Blame shifted between them in furious, tearful arguments, then unified, settling squarely on Elara. How dare she? After all they had done for her, allowing her to shower them with money, enduring her old-fashioned presence at holiday dinners, listening to her quiet advice with feigned interest. "We have to go to her," Bryony declared, her voice sharp with desperation, her eyes wide with a manic glint. "She's obviously lost her mind. This is completely unlike her. We need to talk sense into her, remind her of her responsibilities. She's old, she must be confused." Orion, pale and agitated, nodded frantically, running a hand through his thinning hair. "She must be ill. Or manipulated. Someone must have gotten to her, put these ideas in her head. This isn't the mother I know. She's always been so generous. So understanding." His denial was a fragile shield against the terrifying truth of their impending destitution, a desperate attempt to cling to the narrative that Elara was merely a benevolent, if eccentric, source of funds. They drove to Elara's stately home, a journey usually undertaken with casual indifference, a routine visit to the bank, now fraught with a desperate urgency that made the familiar route seem menacing. The elegant wrought iron gates, which had always swung open at their approach as if by magic, now felt like the imposing entrance to a fortress, a barrier designed to keep them out. When Elara's long-serving housekeeper, Mrs. Davies, opened the door, her expression was unusually reserved, her usual warm smile replaced by a thin, tight line. Her eyes, however, betrayed a hint of something akin to pity for Orion and Bryony, a silent acknowledgement of the storm she knew was about to break. "Is Mother here?" Orion demanded, his voice strained, pushing past Mrs. Davies without waiting for an invitation, his desperation overriding any semblance of manners. Bryony followed, her designer handbag clutched tightly against her chest like a shield, her usual poised walk replaced by a frantic, hurried energy. Elara was in the drawing room, seated by the bay window, a book open in her lap, bathed in the soft afternoon light that streamed through the pristine glass. She looked serene, almost ethereal, utterly composed. There was no tremor in her hands, no fear in her eyes, no hint of the emotional turmoil they expected to find. She merely looked up, a calm, almost detached expression on her face, as if observing a curious, slightly tiresome phenomenon. "Mother!" Orion blurted out, his voice a strained mixture of accusation and feigned concern, laced with an undeniable tremor of fear. "What have you done? The bank, the cars, the children's school. Everything is falling apart. Are you unwell? Has someone coerced you? Someone is clearly taking advantage of you." Bryony, always the more theatrical, rushed forward, dropping to her knees by Elara's armchair, her voice laced with crocodile tears that remained conveniently unshed. "Elara, darling, what is this madness? Think of the grandchildren. Their future is at stake. You can't just pull the rug out from under us. They'll be ruined." She dabbed at her dry eyes with a silk handkerchief, a performance Elara recognized instantly. Elara closed her book slowly, deliberately, the soft thud of the cover a punctuation mark in the tense silence, placing it on the small table beside her. Her gaze, steady and unwavering, settled first on Bryony, observing her theatrics with a cool, assessing gaze, then on Orion. "Please, stand up, Bryony. There is no need for such theatrics. They are quite transparent. And Orion, I assure you, I am perfectly well. And no one has coerced me. This decision is entirely my own, made with full awareness and a clear mind." Her voice was soft, yet it carried an authority that brooked no argument. "But Mother, this is insane!" Orion cried, pacing agitatedly across the exquisite Persian rug, his words tumbling out in a torrent of panic. "You'll ruin us. My business depends on my image. Bryony's social standing, the children will be ostracized. They'll be mocked at school." He gestured wildly, as if the very air was suffocating him. "Your business," Elara stated, her voice calm but cutting, each word a precise incision, has depended on my generosity for over 2 decades, masking its inherent mediocrity. Your image has been meticulously crafted with my funds, a carefully constructed illusion. Bryony's social standing has been a facade paid for by Arthur's legacy, not earned by any intrinsic merit. And as for the children, perhaps it is time they learn the value of hard work, a lesson you both seem to have conveniently forgotten, or perhaps never truly learned. She watched their faces, seeing the dawning horror as her words stripped away their carefully constructed reality. Bryony rose, her feigned sweetness evaporating instantly, replaced by raw anger that distorted her features. How dare you, Elara? After all we've done. We've included you, we've tolerated your quirks. We've given you the joy of seeing us live well, of living the life you could only dream of. Her voice rose to a shrill pitch. Elara's gaze sharpened, a faint, almost imperceptible tremor running through her once gentle voice, now infused with steel, the emotional dam fully broken. Tolerated? Tolerated my quirks? Is that what you call it? Is that what you call canceling my invitation to Christmas dinners, year after year, claiming I'm too frail for the journey, while posting pictures of yourselves on a private jet, laughing and toasting your exclusive family time? Is that what you call dismissing my advice as old-fashioned, while I was secretly paying off your mounting credit card bills, stemming from your modern lavish expenditures, which included many of the gifts you boasted about? She took a deep breath, her eyes blazing with years of suppressed pain, a lifetime of quiet sacrifice and unacknowledged giving. Do you remember the summer I offered to host a small family reunion, a quiet barbecue here at the house, longing for a simple gathering? You told me you were too busy, that your schedules were simply too demanding, only for me to see your social media posts from a yacht in the Mediterranean, a yacht I later discovered you had chartered using funds I had wired for your business expenses, funds you clearly diverted without a second thought, without a shred of conscience. Orion shifted uncomfortably, his face paling, the color draining from his cheeks as her words hit their mark. Mother, you don't understand. Business is tough. We needed that money. It was for our image, our future. He stammered, his usual bluster deserting him. Needed? Elara scoffed, a dry, bitter sound that held no humor. You needed designer handbags, luxury cars, and private jets. You needed to maintain an illusion, a hollow charade, while I, your mother, your benefactor, was reduced to an ATM, a convenient source of funds to uphold your extravagance. You excluded me, you disrespected me, you treated my love as a weakness, and my fortune as an entitlement, a never-ending tap that would flow endlessly at your command. She leaned forward slightly, her voice dropping to a chilling whisper that commanded absolute attention, the quiet intensity far more powerful than any shout. The last straw, Orion, Bryony, was the Maldives. Boasting about your children's nannies, celebrating your family escape, while telling me I was too old for the travel, too frail to join you. That was not just disrespect, it was a public declaration of my irrelevance, a final, definitive statement that I was nothing more than a bank account to be accessed, and then discarded once your needs were met. It was the ultimate betrayal of my silent support. Bryony's face contorted, her carefully constructed mask of anger slipping to reveal genuine fear and confusion. This is ridiculous. You're just angry. You can't just cut us off. We're your family. What about the grandchildren? Do you want to see them on the streets, begging for food? Her voice was laced with a desperate, manipulative plea. They will not be on the streets, Bryony, Elara said, her voice regaining its calm, but with an unyielding finality that resonated through the room. They will learn to live within their means, just as you both now must. I have fulfilled my obligations, and then some. My late husband's legacy was meant to provide security and comfort for me, not to perpetually fund a lifestyle of unearned excess for adults who refuse to take responsibility and live within the bounds of reality. She rose from her chair, her posture regal, embodying a newfound, unbreakable strength that seemed to radiate from her very being. My decision is final. The taps are closed. You will receive no further financial assistance, direct or indirect, from me. You will learn, as so many do, to stand on your own 2 feet. This conversation is over. There is nothing more to discuss. Orion and Bryony stood frozen, their pleas dying on their lips, replaced by the dawning horror of Alara's unshakable resolve. Her eyes, once filled with a yearning for their love, now held only a quiet, absolute certitude, a mirror of the glacial ice she had felt hours ago. The power dynamic had shifted irrevocably, and they were left utterly powerless, their lives suddenly devoid of the hidden hand that had guided their every extravagant step. Orion and Bryony stumbled out of Alara's elegant home, their earlier desperation replaced by a stunned disbelief, then a growing, suffocating panic that made it hard to breathe. The air outside, which had seemed so inviting moments before, now felt heavy, pressing down on them, reflecting the immense weight of their new reality. Alara's words echoed in their minds, each one a hammer blow shattering their privileged existence into 1,000 pieces. The taps are closed. The finality of her statement left no room for negotiation, no crack for manipulation, no hope of a reprieve. They drove home in a silence thicker than any they had ever shared, each consumed by their own burgeoning dread. The sprawling house that had once symbolized their success now felt like a gilded cage, soon to be repossessed, its luxurious emptiness a stark reminder of their impending downfall. The luxury cars they drove, once badges of honor and status symbols, were now liabilities, about to be seized, a humiliating prospect. The immediate fallout was swift and brutal. Within days, the official notices began to arrive, piling up in their once ignored mailbox like harbingers of doom. A stern letter from the mortgage lender, accelerating foreclosure proceedings, a cold, formal warning of the inevitable. A curt email from the car dealership, demanding immediate return of the vehicles or facing legal action, their polite requests now turning into aggressive threats. The children's boarding school confirmed their suspension if fees were not paid within 48 hours, a deadline that felt impossible to meet. The domestic staff, unpaid for weeks, collectively resigned, leaving the once immaculate house in a state of growing disarray, laundry piling up, dust settling on every surface, a tangible symbol of their unraveling lives. Bryony, whose entire self-worth was tied to her social standing and material possessions, found her world collapsing fastest and most painfully. Invitations to exclusive events stopped arriving, the once constant stream of social engagements drying up completely. Her designer shopping sprees ended abruptly, credit cards repeatedly declined in front of shocked sales assistants and curious onlookers. Friends, sensing their financial woes with an almost predatory instinct, began to distance themselves, their calls going unanswered, their carefully cultivated social circle evaporating like mist in the morning sun. She tried desperately to sell some of her more ostentatious jewelry and designer bags, hoping to raise quick cash, only to realize their resale value was a mere fraction of what she'd paid, and the process was humiliating, requiring her to haggle with pawn shop owners and consignment store managers. The thought of living without her daily latte from the exclusive coffee shop, without her weekly blowouts, without the newest "it" bag, sent shivers of genuine terror down her spine, a visceral fear of losing her identity. Orion, meanwhile, was frantically trying to salvage his real estate career, which, without the veneer of wealth and the image of success Alara's money had bought, was revealed to be utterly mediocre. His clients, accustomed to his lavish lifestyle and the impression of boundless resources, began to question his credibility and competence. He lost a major listing, then another, his network of wealthy contacts dissolving. He attempted to borrow money from former colleagues and even distant relatives, but his reputation for relying on his mother's wealth had subtly preceded him, and no one was willing to risk their own capital on his dubious ventures. The big deals he always boasted about remained elusive, now cruelly out of reach, replaced by the grim reality of a collapsing market and his own lack of genuine skill. He even tried to reach out to his children's trust fund manager, making desperate pleas, only to be met with the same unyielding response. Alara's instructions were clear, the funds were frozen, untouchable. The thought of his children having to attend public school, or worse, having their allowances cut to zero, filled him with a mixture of fear and rage, an unfamiliar sensation of helplessness. Their conversations became a volley of accusations and recriminations, their opulent home, once a sanctuary of privilege, transforming into a battleground of financial panic and bitter blame. "This is all your fault, Orion. You should have managed her better. You let her control everything." Bryony shrieked, tears finally flowing freely, not from sadness, but from pure, selfish frustration and fear for her lost status. "My fault. You're the one who kept pushing for more, Bryony. The Maldives trip was your idea. And you're the one who kept insulting her old-fashioned ways, making her feel like an antique." Orion retorted, his face red with anger and fear, his own self-preservation instincts kicking in. Their once harmonious, if superficial, relationship fractured under the immense pressure. The children, witnessing their parents' increasingly erratic behavior and reduced circumstances, became sullen and rebellious, demanding explanations their parents couldn't provide, their sense of entitlement colliding with a harsh new reality. Their world, once so stable and luxurious, was spiraling into chaos, a whirlwind of debt and recrimination. Meanwhile, Elara, oblivious to the precise turmoil she had unleashed, found a profound sense of liberation. The silence in her elegant home was no longer heavy with unspoken longing and the quiet burden of resentment, but light with a newfound peace, a joyous freedom she hadn't known was possible. That very evening, she called an old university friend, Evelyn, whom she hadn't spoken to in years, a friendship she'd let drift as she poured all her energy and emotional capital into her son's family, a family that had only taken and never truly given. "Evelyn," Elara said, her voice soft with genuine warmth, a warmth that resonated with the rekindled bond, "it's Elara. I was wondering, would you like to finally take that cruise to the Norwegian fjords we always talked about? My treat, and I mean my treat this time." Evelyn, delighted and surprised by the unexpected call, accepted immediately, her enthusiasm contagious. Elara then began to explore new avenues for her time and resources, avenues she had long ignored. She looked into supporting local arts programs, a passion she'd always loved but never had the mental space or emotional freedom for. She started planning a trip to Italy, a lifelong dream she'd always deferred, claiming she needed to be available for Orion and Bryony, anticipating their next unannounced need for funds. For the first time in decades, Elara was truly living for herself, guided by her own desires and interests. The burden of expectation, the weight of their ingratitude, had lifted, revealing a world of possibilities she had long forgotten existed. The first tentative steps into her new life were filled with a quiet joy, a profound sense of freedom she hadn't known was possible, a freedom born from self-respect. Months turned into a year, then two. The seasons cycled, and with them, the lives of Elara, Orion, and Bryony underwent a radical, irreversible transformation, each finding their place in a new, unchosen reality. Elara's world had blossomed into a vibrant tapestry of self-discovery and genuine connection. She took that long-promised cruise to the Norwegian fjords with Evelyn, marveling at the majestic landscapes and rediscovering the joy of carefree travel. She then embarked on a solo tour of Italy, immersing herself in the art and history of Florence, the bustling markets of Rome, and the serene beauty of the Tuscan countryside. She enrolled in a ceramics class, her hands finding a forgotten passion for sculpting clay, creating pieces that reflected her inner peace. Her days were filled with purpose and genuine joy, not forced smiles or anxious anticipation of demands. She volunteered at a local animal shelter, finding profound solace in the unconditional love of abandoned creatures, their simple needs a refreshing contrast to the complex demands of her former family. Her elegant home, once a quiet refuge from family drama and the weight of financial provision, now hummed with the gentle rhythm of a life truly lived. She hosted small, intimate gatherings with old friends and new acquaintances, people who valued her for her wit, her wisdom, and her companionship, not her bank balance or what she could provide. She spent her money not on lavish gifts for ungrateful recipients, but on experiences that enriched her soul, on causes she believed in deeply, and on simple pleasures that brought her genuine contentment. Her laughter, once rare and tinged with wistfulness, now rang out freely, a testament to her newfound freedom and inner harmony. She looked younger, lighter, the lines of worry around her eyes softened by an enduring peace, a quiet contentment radiating from her. Orion and Bryony's reality was starkly different, a brutal awakening from their gilded dream. The luxurious house had been foreclosed and sold at a significant loss, leaving them with mounting debt. Their luxury cars had been repossessed, the humiliation of having them towed away a public spectacle in their formerly exclusive neighborhood. The children, initially furious and confused by their sudden downward mobility, had been forced to transfer to public schools, an immense blow to their social standing and perceived future. Orion, stripped of his financial crutches and the illusion of success, had been forced to take a salaried position at a modest real estate agency, one where he had to actually work for his commission, often clocking long, thankless hours showing ordinary properties to ordinary people. His boasts of big deals were replaced by quiet complaints about demanding clients and meager earnings, the harsh realities of a competitive market. Bryony, stripped of her designer labels and social facade, had struggled even more profoundly. Her socialite friends had vanished entirely, their superficial bonds unable to withstand the absence of her wealth. She eventually found part-time work at a high-end boutique, ironically selling the very designer clothes she once bought without a second thought, enduring the indignity of serving women who still lived the life she had lost. The endless shopping trips and manicured lunches were replaced by budgeting, grocery shopping in discount stores, and even, to her utter dismay, cleaning her own small, rented apartment, a task she had never imagined performing. The children, initially resentful and angry at their parents for their perceived failure, slowly began to adapt to their new, less privileged existence. The shock of having their allowances cut and their elite status vanish had forced them to confront a reality where effort yielded reward, where self-reliance was a necessity. They learned to make friends based on personality rather than shared privilege, discovering that genuine connection was far more valuable than fleeting social status. They discovered hobbies that didn't require exorbitant fees, finding joy in simple activities. While their relationship with their parents was strained by the constant financial stress and recriminations, a subtle, almost imperceptible shift began to occur as they witnessed Orion and Bryony struggle, forcing them to become more independent and resourceful. There were attempts, of course, to reconnect with Elara. Orion called several times, his voice no longer demanding, but tinged with a desperate humility she had never heard before. Bryony sent a carefully worded card for Christmas, devoid of any mention of money, merely wishing her well and expressing vague sentiments of missing her. Elara received them all with polite distance, acknowledging their overtures but never engaging fully. She responded to the card with a brief, generic message. When Orion called, she would listen calmly, offer noncommittal pleasantries, asking about their general well-being, but she never offered an olive branch of financial reconciliation. She knew their renewed interest was still rooted in what she could provide, or at least the memory of it, not in genuine affection or remorse. She had learned that true love and respect cannot be bought, nor can they be forced. They must be freely given, nurtured by mutual understanding and genuine regard. Her biggest lesson was not just for them, but for herself, that the truest loyalty a person can show is not to those who exploit their generosity, but to their own well-being, their own peace, and their own profound self-worth. Thank you for joining us on Elara's remarkable journey of self-liberation. Her story is a powerful reminder that while family bonds can be complex, true love and respect can never be bought with money. Sometimes, the most loving act is to allow others to stand on their own, and the most courageous act is to reclaim your own life. If you are moved by Elara's story, we have many more tales of justice, resilience, and life lessons right here on our channel. Don't miss out on these incredible narratives. Hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you're always the first to know when a new video drops. Now, we want to hear from you. Have you ever encountered similar ingratitude from someone you've helped? Or perhaps you've had to make a difficult decision to prioritize your own well-being over others' expectations. Share your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. We read every single one, and your insights truly enrich our community.